Is Tucker Carlson a commie? I guarantee you within the next 24 hours, that is what you will be hearing from a far left media. Yeah, Tucker Carlson has gone to Russia and will be interviewing Vladimir Putin, and there are some things that you should know before you hear the interview to hear what others have had to say about the Russia-Ukraine war, because I believe that's what he's going to be talking about. Tucker Carlson is in Russia as we speak right now, getting ready for the interview with Vladimir Putin, and here's a message that he wanted to send the Americans before the interview.
We're in Moscow tonight. We're here to interview the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. We'll be doing that soon. There are risks to conducting an interview like this, obviously, so we've thought about it carefully over many months. Here's why we're doing it. First, because it's our job. We're in journalism. Our duty is to inform people. 2 years into a war that's reshaping the entire world, most Americans are not informed. They have no real idea what's happening in this region, here in Russia or 600 miles away in Ukraine. But they should know. They're paying for much of it in ways they might not fully yet perceive. The war in Ukraine is a human disaster. It's left hundreds of thousands of people dead, an entire generation of young Ukrainians, and it's depopulated the largest country in Europe. But the long-term effects are even more profound. This war has utterly reshaped the global military and trade alliances, and the sanctions that followed have as well. And in total, they have upended the world economy. The post-World War II economic order, the system that guaranteed prosperity in the West for more than 80 years, is coming apart very fast, and along with it, the dominance of the US dollar. These are not small changes. They are history-altering developments. They will define the lives of our grandchildren. Most of the world understands this perfectly well. They can see it. Ask anyone in Asia or the Middle East what the future looks like. And yet the populations of the English-speaking countries seem mostly unaware. They think that as nothing has really changed. And they think that because no one has told them the truth. Their media outlets are corrupt. They lie to their readers and viewers. And they do that mostly by omission. For example, since the day the war in Ukraine began, American media outlets have spoken to scores of people from Ukraine, and they have done scores of interviews with Ukrainian President Zelensky. We ourselves have put in a request for an interview with Zelensky, and we hope he accepts. But the interviews he's already done in the United States are not traditional interviews. They are fawning pep sessions specifically designed to amplify Zelensky's demand that the U.S. enter more deeply into a war in Eastern Europe and pay for it. That is not journalism. It is government propaganda. Propaganda of the ugliest kind, the kind that kills people. At the same time, our politicians and media outlets have been doing this, promoting a foreign leader like he's a new consumer brand. Not a single Western journalist has bothered to interview the president of the other country involved in this conflict, Vladimir Putin. Most Americans have no idea why Putin invaded Ukraine or what his goals are now. They've never heard his voice. That's wrong. Americans have a right to know all they can about a war they're implicated in, and we have the right to tell them about it because we are Americans too. Freedom of speech is our birthright. We were born with the right to say what we believe. That right cannot be taken away no matter who is in the White House. But they're trying anyway. Almost 3 years ago, the Biden administration illegally spied on our text messages and then leaked the contents to their servants in the news media. They did this in order to stop a Putin interview that we were planning. Last month, we're pretty certain they did exactly the same thing once again. But this time, we came to Moscow anyway. We are not here because we love Vladimir Putin. We are here because we love the United States, and we want it to remain prosperous and free. We paid for this trip ourselves. We took no money from any government or group, nor are we charging people to see the interview. It is not behind a paywall. Anyone can watch the entire thing, shot live to tape and unedited, on our website, tuckercarlson.com. Elon Musk, to his great credit, has promised not to suppress or block this interview once we post it on his platform, X, and we're grateful for that. Western governments, by contrast, will certainly do their best to censor this video on other less principled platforms because that's what they do. They are afraid of information they can't control. But you have no reason to be afraid of it. We are not encouraging you to agree with what Putin may say in this interview, but we are urging you to watch it. You should know as much as you can. And then, like a free citizen and not a slave, You can decide for yourself. Thanks.
And now for the information that, if you don't know about the Ukraine war, or know very little about it, Robert Kennedy Jr. came out to say he was worried about the censorship of the war, for one, and for two, he was concerned because Biden literally could have stopped the war from happening, but he didn't. He's the one who encouraged it. Here's what Robert Kennedy Jr. had to say to a reporter who asked him a question regarding the Ukraine war when he was on the campaign trail. Take a listen.
You're running to unseat a Democrat. You're running as a Democrat. My question to you is, what's your biggest issue with President Biden's leadership?
The censorship, the war, and putting neocons, war-mongering neocons in front of in charge of our foreign policy, and putting Wall Street in charge of our domestic policy and our economy.
So what would you do differently?
I would do everything differently. I would negotiate with the Russians, which is what they've wanted to do from day one. The Russians signed a peace agreement in March of 2022, which we just found out about, and Zelensky initialed it. And the Russians were actually withdrawing their troops in March of 2022 and April of 2022. And President Biden sent Boris Johnson to Kiev to blow up that agreement. And since then, 135,000 kids, Ukrainian kids, have died, and 50,000 Russian kids. My son went over to Ukraine and fought in the Kharkiv offensive. He was a machine gunner in a special forces unit. And so, I'm deeply concerned with the welfare of the people in Ukraine. I admire their valor. They died unnecessarily to fulfill an ambition of the United States, which was to use Ukraine in a proxy war with Russia. In fact, when President Biden was asked about what the purpose of the war was, he said regime change in Russia. When Lloyd Austin, his Secretary of Defense, was asked in April 2022, right after they blew up the agreement, why are we in Ukraine? He said, to exhaust the Russian army and degrade its capacity to fight anywhere else in the world. That is not about Ukrainian freedom. It is about using Ukraine in a proxy war, in a geopolitical dispute between two great powers. I'm not making any excuse for Vladimir Putin. His invasion was illegal, it was brutal, and he had other options. But did we deliberately provoke the action? Yes, we did. Again and again and again, we would not allow Zelensky to sign the Minsk Accords in 2019. Zelensky ran as the peace candidate. He's a comedian. He's an actor, which I'm not disparaging because that's what my wife does. But he had never been in politics. But he won with 70% of the vote. Why? Because he ran promising that he would sign the Minsk Accords, which were already agreed to by Russia, by France, and by Germany. And then the United States, our White House, went over there and we would not let him sign. If we had let him sign, this war would have never happened and all those kids would be alive today. Not only have we made the worst geopolitical mistake, which is to push the Russians into an embrace of China, which is the worst geopolitical outcome that we can imagine. We've essentially fueled the creation of BRICS, where 40 nations are now threatening to get off of the dollar as the world reserve currency. If that continues, then that will make the Great Depression look like a cakewalk for us.
Robert Kennedy Jr., and he knows what he's talking about. He's not stupid. He's got a little inside information that some of us aren't privy to, but as we know, that might have not hit the mainstream, that his candidacy, they're kind of holding that back a little bit. I understand. It's election time. But that's Robert Kennedy Jr. here in America, giving us the information that Americans get. Now, what about Europe? No, Tucker Carlson did an interview with the Hungarian president. He had this to say about the Russia war.
The view is that Ukraine is winning this war. It doesn't sound like that's true.
No, it's a lie. It's not just a misunderstanding. It's a lie. It's impossible. Everybody who's in politics and understand the logic, the figures, the data, no way.
So they're not going to get sick of Putin and throw him out?
Come on, it's a joke.
How would you approach that? What would it look like, the settlement?
First, you should admit, probably publicly acknowledging that the key is in your hand. So if United States would like to have a peace, next morning there is a peace.
Said very boldly, you could end this Ukrainian-Russia war in 24 hours.
Yeah.
How?
So I know Zelensky very well because he was very honorable with the fake phone call, impeachment hoax #1. They said I made a phone call to him and I was very threatening. I wasn't at all. I was actually very nice. I was congratulating him on a victory. But when they asked him, they said, were you threatened? He didn't even know what they were talking about. He was very honorable. He could have done grandstand and said, yeah, I felt threatened. He didn't do that. And as you know, I get along very well with Putin. I would tell Putin, gotta settle. I would tell Zelensky, you gotta settle. I would tell one, you're gonna load up with money. I'd tell the other, you're not gonna get any money. I would get a settlement in 24 hours. You're gonna find out when this whole thing is over that the number of people killed is far greater than they tell you. They're not telling you the truth. Many, many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are dying. These cities are being obliterated. And basically they say, what's your stance? Are you for Russia or are you for... I'm for one thing very simple. I want to stop people from getting killed, and I'll have it stopped.
So if you were in charge of NATO, if you were, say, Joe Biden, what would your next move be in the war in Ukraine? What would you do?
Peace, immediately. Call back Trump. That's the only way out.
Call back Trump.
Call back Trump. Because, you know, you can criticize him for many reasons. I understand all the discussion, but, you know, the best foreign policy of the recent several decades belonged to him. He did not initiate any new war.
Yes.
He treated nicely the North Koreans and Russia, even the Chinese, you know. He delivered a policy which was the best one for Middle East, Abraham Accords.
Yes.
So that was a very good foreign policy. He's criticized that he's not educated enough to understand the world. But this is not the case. Facts count. And his foreign policy was the best one for the world in the last several decades I have seen. And if he would have been the president at the moment of the Russian invasion started, no, it would be not possible to do that by the Russians. So Trump is the man who can save the Western world and probably the human beings in the globe as well. That's my personal conviction.
I don't want you to think this video is about Donald Trump. He could save the world. It's not about him at all. It's about Vladimir Putin and what these people from America and other countries are saying about the Russian-Ukraine war. It doesn't have to be. Now we've headed over to Europe. We're in America. In Europe, talked about the Middle East. Now we're going to go down to Africa. So here's the president of Eritrea about the Russian-Ukraine war.
This is war declared on Russia, led by Washington and NATO. It's very clear, it's a very simple thing. This idea of war in Ukraine or war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine is not true at all. This is war declared by NATO and Washington against the Russian Federation for the last 30 years. This has been going on and on and on for the last 30 years. How can you contain Russia, not enable Russia to economically compete? It's not a war between Russia and Ukraine. For that matter, our position was clear. We were against this so-called global order or world order. This is not a war between Russia and Ukraine. This is a war declared by NATO, led by Washington, and Russia had a right to defend itself, not alone. It's not an isolated Russian case. This is a global issue. And we need an order, a global order or a world order that enables everybody to share, cooperate. Complementarity will have to be there. You can't contain someone, you can't contain one nation, you can't force or even use force, all sorts of coercion to subdue nations. This is not acceptable.
So here we have Africa chiming in, and they're saying the same thing. So what's going to be talked about tomorrow in the Tucker Carlson interview? Well, around the world, other people are saying maybe what Putin's going to say tomorrow. And who knows? It's Putin. But it's also good to know, or good to have, this other information in your repertoire of information on the Ukraine and Russian war before you just listen to Putin. Hopefully this helps you all. Hopefully it provided some sort of educational service to you. And maybe you knew it already. If you didn't, now you do. We can use it and just make your own decisions. Make up your own mind. So with that freedom and liberty, you can also like and subscribe and click that notification button so when I get this information out, you can get information in. Thanks again for watching. I appreciate all you newcomers here coming to the Speak and See show. Love you guys. Have a blessed night. Bye-bye.